Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jeremy Leffler, and I work in the Policy Office at the National Science Foundation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today to our Fall 2021 NSF Virtual Grants Conference. I'm now pleased to present this session covering the role of the NSF Office of Inspector General. This session will be presented by Lee Stokes, an investigative attorney, and Keith Nackerud, an audit manager with the NSF Office of Inspector General.
Hello, I'm Keith Nackerud with the Office of Audits, and presenting with me today is Lee Stokes with the Office of Investigations.
Hello.
Today we will be acquainting you with the NSF Office of Inspector General. Next slide, please. The Office of Inspector General conducts audits of NSF and NSF awardee recipients, as well as investigating violations of law, research misconduct, fraud, waste, and abuse. Both audits and investigations operate under the Inspector General Act, 5 United States Code. The OIG also invests heavily in outreach with NSF stakeholders. I'd like to invite you to visit our website at nsf.gov/OIG/outreach for more information and links to our publications and brochures. Now I'll share more about the audit activities that we do, and after that, I'll turn it over to Lee to share more about the investigations activities. Next slide, please. You may be wondering how the OIG selects NSF awardees to audit. Each year, we create and follow a work plan. Audits are included for a variety of reasons. For example, some audits are legislative or congressional mandates. Others may be referrals from the National Science Foundation, the National Science Board, whistleblowers, Office of Investigations, and we also select some audits based on our own internal risk assessment. A little bit more on that later. Next slide, please. First, I'd like to briefly cover the types of audits that you may participate in. In all of these audits, the auditors will be looking at two things: what actually happened and what was supposed to happen. External audits do this by taking a data-driven approach to examine all costs claimed on NSF awards during the audit scope. Single audit reviews look at your single audit auditors to verify that their quality meets standards. Single audit reviews consist of desk and quality control reviews. Quality control reviews are much more in-depth, while desk reviews are higher level and much quicker. Next slide, please. As I mentioned previously, we employ a risk model to select audits of awardees. This model includes factors such as dollar amount, drawdown pattern, number of NSF awards, and other data, such as single audit results and current pertinent issues, like the coronavirus and its impacts. Our office recently conducted 10 audits and a capstone report to specifically examine the use of the coronavirus flexibilities that were issued by the Office of Management and Budget. I'd encourage you to head to our website to take a look at that work. Next slide, please. There is a separate process for selecting single audit reviews. Each year, 85 desk reviews are completed and 2 to 3 in-depth quality control reviews. Selection factors for these audits include things like prior single audit results, results of prior desk reviews and quality control reviews, as well as the audit firm's characteristics, for example, their risk exposure to NSF funds. And we also look at things like whether the auditor is a member of the Government Audit Quality Center. Next slide, please. Regardless of the type of audit, our office values open and frequent communication with auditees. We have found this ensures undue burden is avoided while honoring and respecting everyone's time. There is a lot of communication that occurs throughout the audit beyond these 6 steps. These are just the key points that I want to highlight. Steps 1 and 2 occur relatively close together and officially kick off the audit. At the entrance conference, we like to discuss the audit process and answer any questions your management might have. Between steps 2 and 3, the majority of audit work is accomplished, and there was a lot of communication related to data requests, interviews, process walkthroughs, and preliminary issues identified. Steps 3 through 6 are the closeout and reporting phase of the audit. The fieldwork discussion draft is created, and as its name suggests, this allows for a discussion of the remaining potential audit findings. An exit conference is held to go over the contents of the discussion draft, and then an official draft is created. This will be provided to you for your official response. Your response will be included in its entirety in the audit report, and we typically give 30 days for you to provide that response. Then the final audit report is created and issued in a redacted form, and this is to protect any sensitive information. We are required by law to publish a report on our website within 3 days of final issuance. And I'd like to encourage you to take a look at our website and our Twitter feed for the more recent reports. This can be a great tool to ensure that you avoid any audit findings at your institution. And now I'd like to turn it over to Stokes to discuss the Office of Investigations and their activities.
Thank you, Keith. I'm Lee Stokes. I'm an investigative attorney with the investigation side of the Office of Inspector General at NSF, and we base our jurisdiction on 5 USC Appendix. We prevent and detect waste, fraud, abuse through administrative, civil, and criminal investigations. Our jurisdiction is generally where NSF is a victim of wrongdoing, although we follow the money, and usually we have more than 100 active cases at any given time. Next slide. So we get allegations from a number of different places. Our investigations involve entities not abiding by award conditions or regulations, naughty people misusing NSF funds or violating a criminal statute. We also look into research misconduct area, which is plagiarism, including intellectual theft, falsification, and fabrication. We also handle whistleblower retaliation allegations. Next slide, please. We get allegations from a number of sources, and anyone may confidentially contact NSF on our homepage links, which are included in this, and as Keith has mentioned, nsf.gov/OIG. That'll take you to our homepage, and there is a button that says report an allegation. Next slide, please. This slide has the general steps that are part of the investigative process. We don't do every step in every investigation, but this should give you a flavor for what we do. Our cases generally start with intake, and an investigative assistant reviews the allegation and does some preliminary work to identify whether or not this is an NSF issue. Just to note, occasionally we get allegations that actually involve awards from other agencies. We will forward those to the appropriate people at the other agency. Our primary task as investigators is to fact find. We want to establish what happened and to make sure such events will not happen again. So this may involve interviews, subpoenas, site visit. If the matter is criminal and we're working with the United States Attorney's Office, then there may be a warrant served. So once we identify the facts, we have to figure out what to do with them. So we may refer to university research misconduct, a U.S. Attorney's Office, or we may refer it to NSF. Slide 12, please. So this is an overview of our administrative types of cases. As you can see, whistleblowing, research misconduct, human subjects research. Next slide, please. And this is a showing of the criminal and civil statutes that we use, and some of them you'll see in a case study in a bit. Next slide, please. So as I briefly mentioned above, there are a number of outcomes that our cases may have. They're not mutually exclusive. We may have a case that resulted in civil prosecution or a civil settlement and compliance agreement. We may also refer that to NSF and suggest that a PI who was naughty be terminated, have the award terminated, or be required to submit certifications and assurances for a number of years going forward. In the most severe cases, we can recommend that an individual or an entity be suspended or debarred government-wide. We can also ask for reprimands and retractions of publications that have research misconduct. In any case, we go to DOJ with civil and criminal matters. We go to NSF for suspension or termination of award. Interesting fact, if we're in the midst of an investigation and there are significant facts that show that an entity or an individual is a bad steward of federal funds, specifically NSF funds, we may ask NSF to suspend or terminate the award during our investigation. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, our jurisdiction generally follows NSF funds. So in this particular case, a university submitted claims for 5 years and expended NSF funds under several NSF awards. And each time an entity requests funds from NSF, it certifies that those funds have been used in accordance with award conditions. And these conditions require that the expenditures be allocable, allowable, and reasonable, and that the university maintain adequate records to support the claims. Spoiler alert, these people did not. So originally, this case started because the Office of Audit at NSF-OIG has sent a CPA firm to look at this university. And the auditors identified salary and non-salary expenditures that were unallowable, not allocable, meaning that they had nothing to do with the award to which they were charged. The entity also had paperwork issues in that it had insufficient, inadequate, or a lack of supporting documentation. So the auditor questioned those expenditures. When an entity cannot support expenditures, NSF may disallow those items, meaning that the university would have to repay the money. So the university administrator, realizing that they're missing documents, tasked the compliance coordinator with providing the missing effort report. That person directed the principal investigators to submit backdated effort reports based on the salary amounts that they had been paid rather than the salary amounts for the work they did. And the university employees fabricated time and effort records and provided them to the auditors. The coordinator also doctored documents using whiteout and other methods to alter the information. And she kept the university officials apprised of her progress getting these missing documents. The auditors noticed something. The CPA noted the whiteout and other issues and brought the matter to the attention of OIG Audit, which stopped the audit and referred the matter to investigations. We investigated and we found emails that were very interesting. That's how we found out the extent of the scheme. And we found an email that said, we have no idea what faculty are actually being paid or how they are parceling out to their grants. So submission of fabricated documents and requesting funds for undocumented salary constitutes a violation of the Civil False Claims Act. And under the False Claims Act, the government can get up to 3 times the damages and a penalty for each claim. In 2021, the minimum penalty was $11,803 and the max of $23,331 per false claim. That means every time they asked for money on the awards impacted. Ultimately, we determined that there was $540,000 in question cost. These were primarily salaries and then the fringe benefits and the indirect costs associated with those salaries. We settled for double at $1.7 million and a settlement including a 5-year compliance plan. The university compliance coordinator pled guilty to 1 count of official certificate or writings for knowingly making or giving a certification she knew to be false, and she was sentenced to 1 year probation. She was not charged with a felony because she didn't actually benefit from the scheme. She did not steal money for her own use. Next slide, please. So in this case, the university had a pattern and practice of paying grad students to perform unrelated work. Their PhD required that they do teaching assistant duties, but the university was charging the time spent doing teaching assistant duties to federal research grants. So a grad student paid to do research by NSF was not doing the research full time, it was doing these teaching tasks. And then NSF had not intended or agreed to pay the teaching assistants. So this means the university was charging NSF incorrectly. And as we mentioned before, an expense may only be charged to an award if it's allocable and it's incurred specifically for that award, or it benefits that award, or it's necessary for the overall operation of the awardee and is assigned in part to NSF in accordance with the terms and conditions. So each time the university drew down funds to pay these grad students from the NSF award, and it included time spent doing a teaching assistant, those certifications were false. So they had a number of false claims. So we took this case to the appropriate United States Attorney's Office, where it was accepted for civil prosecution. Ultimately, a settlement was reached totaling $3.75 million to resolve the allegations. And then the university, to prevent this from occurring again, set up a teaching assistant fund. And that's what they use to pay grad students for teaching duties going forward. Next slide, please. This case involves our Small Business Innovative Research Program. And a professor at a university created a company, a research firm. And the company relied exclusively on federal grants for funding its research activities. And the problem was that he had also been being paid as a researcher for an institute of the Chinese Academy of Science. And he submitted a grant proposal to NSF under the SBIR that for work that had already been researched and completed in China. He intended to use the grant funds for other projects rather than for the projects that NSF wanted him to use it for, that he told NSF he was going to use it for. And he also obstructed the investigation by submitting false timesheets to the government investigators. And that was according to the evidence presented at trial. He was found guilty of conspiracy, 3 counts of a false statement, and obstruction by falsification. He ultimately served 3 months pretrial, and he was judged a flight risk, and then was he was put on house arrest until the trial, and he has 2 years supervised release. Next slide. This case involves a university that had multiple NSF awards. Those awards went to a research center in another country. And some of the funds also funded work at the center by the PI. The PI was the lead PI, so he controlled all the money from the university at the center. And the center would invoice the university for expenses approved by this lead PI. University paid invoices for over 9 years without ever reviewing, requesting, or receiving documents to support the millions sent to the center. Over 20 of the invoices were advances totaling $8.4 million, which were not used to cover immediate needs and resulted in interest, which the university did not forward to the government as required. We subpoenaed documents related to the NSF awards. The university was unable to support the vast majority of the expenditures for which it had requested reimbursement from NSF. We also determined that the award funds had been commingled, bad, don't commingle funds, meaning there was no way to determine which expenditures went with which award, which were allocable, as we discussed above. This means that the university certified that the expenses had been made for the purpose and conditions of the award, but they had no way of knowing that, and that is reckless disregard at a minimum. So it made each of the 48 certifications they made a false claim. Lucky for them, bad for us, that this was before NSF required that universities request funds by award. This is back when they did quarterly financial reporting and told NSF 4 times a year what they were spending. So those 48 claims or certifications are over a number of years. So the funds at issues involve salary, equipment, travel. The university's single audit identified the issues and notified the university of that the funds had been improperly used. And the university waited 2 years to notify NSF. We actually had started the case before they notified us. This case was referred by the Office of Audit because they were reviewing single audits. In addition to the requirement that expenditures be supported by documentation, the U had an obligation to notify NSF of problems related to financial management of the award, and they did not. So the outcome of this investigation was that the university paid $2.7 million to settle the claims and had a 5-year compliance plan. Next slide, please. And the next case is under our research misconduct reg, which is 45 CFR 689. Finding a research misconduct requires that there be a significant departure from accepted practices of the relevant research community, that the research misconduct be committed intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly, and that the allegation be proven by preponderance of the evidence. So in this case, an NSF-supported grad student falsified data, plagiarized another researcher's dissertation, and committed ethical violations in preparing and submitting manuscripts, which were published in 2 journals. First, the person submitted a manuscript for publication that contained data, text, and figures from somebody else's work without that person's consent and without acknowledging that those figures and everything had come from another student, and knew when they submitted the paper that some of the data was questionable because there was the compound used in that series of experiments had been compromised, submitted the manuscript without the co-author's knowledge and consent, in fact, falsified the journal submission page and used false email addresses purporting to be the co-authors. The manuscript was also committed to 7 journals simultaneously. When caught, the student blamed hostile work environment, improper supervision, falsely claimed they'd never received responsible conduct of research training, although university records showed otherwise, and overall the advisor's lack of interest. In other words, the student blamed everybody but the student. The student felt that student deserved publication after working on the compounds for the advisor, and so the university conducted a research misconduct investigation and determined that the student had committed falsification and plagiarism. They dismissed the student, and the publications were retracted. And the university going forward will require better training of grad students. So we got the case and we wrote a report of investigation, which we submitted to NSF, in which we recommended that there be a finding of research misconduct and a letter of reprimand sent to the student, that the student be debarred government-wide for 3 years, and for 6 years thereafter, the student had to submit written certifications at the same time as any proposal-related documents were sent to NSF, certifying that they contained no research misconduct. They had to get a responsible official of the student's employer to do the same, to assure NSF that there was no research misconduct in the documents submitted. And the student could not serve as an NSF reviewer, advisor, or consultant. NSF agreed with our recommendations and imposed those acts. Next slide. So these are some best practices. I think a lot of them boil down to, when in doubt, ask your program officer, get their advice in writing if you can. If they give you advice orally, then you should write it down, send them an email and saying, this is what I got from our conversation. Did I get it is my understanding correct? We'd also recommend training for everyone who handles any federal awards, including PIs, administrative staff, financial staff, and depending on whether or not grad students can request equipment from particular grants, the grad students too. Training is part of any compliance agreement that we have. So might as well do it before, and hopefully we'll never have to visit you for problems with an NSF award. And now I'm going to turn it over back to Keith.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Lee. A core value of the OIG is protecting NSF employees, contractors, award recipients, and subrecipients who step forward to identify potential wrongdoing. Federal law prohibits retaliation for providing information reasonably believed to be evidence of a violation of law, gross mismanagement, waste, abuse of authority, and a substantial or specific danger to public health and safety. Please visit our website at nsf.gov/OIG/whistleblower for more information. Next slide, please. You can also contact Mr. William Kilgallen within our Office of Investigations if you'd like to discuss specific issues or have specific questions about whistleblowing. Next slide, please. Here's a variety of ways you can contact us via email, phone, fax, or on Twitter, as well as our physical address if you'd like to send us a letter, and of course our website at www.nsf.gov/OIG. Next slide, please. Thank you for your time, and we'd love to answer any questions.
Okay, welcome back. And I'd like to ask Lee and Keith to come back. And we do have a few questions that we received during the presentation. So I'd like to begin asking those now. The first question is asking, are investigations limited to grant recipients that have $750,000 or more in federal funds?
No.
Okay.
We look at small business innovative research.
Okay. The next question is, if a whistleblower makes a detailed complaint but is not able to provide documentation, will the complaint still be investigated?
That is decided on a case-by-case basis if there's a sufficient information for us to go forward. I can't answer that as a blanket statement. We try, if there are grounds, we try to go forward with the case.
Okay. Next question is asking about bullying, and when we use the term bullying, also I guess I will use the term harassment, but do you do investigations with regard to bullying or harassment? If an investigator is being bullied, for example, by a PI and making false claims to about that new investigator to NSF or to other funding agencies, is that something that the OIG would look into, or how would that be handled with the university or institution?
That is a good question. What we would do is take the intake and then we would discuss it with other areas of NSF who might be better able to handle it in this specific situation. We have an Office of Diversity and Inclusion. So we make a determination with them if they think this case is more in our bailiwick or in theirs. And
Great.
sometimes, for example, they would ask us to do the investigation, even though it would.
Okay, and how does NSF announce findings of research misconduct?
They're available where there is a finding of research misconduct. It is on the EPLS. It's on the federal site. I don't have the off the top of my head, but it would be on the, it just changed. It used to be SAM. I think it's EPLS, although that site is updating. Anybody who is currently under a suspension, government-wide suspension or debarment would be on the government-wide list. I will look that up.
Okay, you can drop that in the chat if you like, and we can send that information to everyone that way. Can you talk about the OIG's experience with investigating violations of requirements regarding harassment and sexual assault? So you talked a little bit about this already with regard to bullying, but I'll give you another chance to answer this question a little bit more if you'd like.
I have not personally had any of those cases. So this is something I can add if it would be useful later. I have not had a case involving bullying or harassment. I don't know that we have had them. Trying to think. Often, if that is the case, it would be the couple cases I've heard of it. It has already been handled by the university by the time we got the allegation. So I really don't know the answer to that.
Okay. There's a question here that's asking about boilerplates within departments when it comes to general resources. They're saying, is this considered plagiarism? We may need a little bit more information on that question, but that's what I have to go with here.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, I'm guessing if the person is asking if they're using boilerplate language from within their departments, is that considered plagiarism if they're including that in their proposals or project reports, perhaps? I guess it would be something that would need to be taken on a case-by-case basis.
So if your department has language that you're supposed to use, boilerplate language, presumably you have permission to use it. And it is, you have permission to use that language, and you're supposed to use that language. So I'm not sure that particular language would constitute plagiarism. Now, if that language wasn't used throughout your department and you saw a coworker's description and thought it was good and just stuck it in yours, that might perhaps be plagiarism if you did not have that coworker's permission or otherwise indicate that you had gotten this from a different source.
Okay, I don't have any more questions in the Q&A. So with that, I'd like to thank both Keith and Lee for joining us today. And I hope you'll join us this afternoon for a session covering updates to NSF policies and procedures. Thank you very much. Take care, everyone.